evening, and thank you for joining us. Thunder Bay Police are sounding the alarm about a sharp rise in two types of sudden deaths that have them very concerned. The first is a spike in suicides. Police would not disclose the exact number, but do say they've seen over 150 mental health-related calls in July alone. Detective Inspector John Fennell says police are calling on the public to check in on their loved ones before it's too late.
Usually we're able to intervene or assist and able to get the people the help, and recently we're finding people are unfortunately coming to their illness or succumbing to their illness and taking their own lives. This is causing us to want to reach out to make sure that family members, loved ones, co-workers, if they're starting to see somebody that's falling into a mental health situation, to make sure that they contact some professionals, try to get the person some help.
Meanwhile, police continue to see more overdose deaths. Fentanyl-linked drugs such as Purple Down and Blue Down were blamed in the past, but now a drug called Pink Down or Pink Dizzy has been found, which is much more potent. Fennell says in the last 48 hours, police have responded to 3 overdoses linked to it, with 2 being fatal. And what's especially worrying to police is that the pink drug seems to be immune to the Narcan medication.
We are nervous that this stuff is strong enough that the Narcan doesn't have the effect that it normally would. We've been very successfully using it, as well as the medical professionals in the past with fentanyl. And this one, again, knowing that Narcan was used, it did not have the effect we hoped.
Police are encouraging people who struggle with addiction or their families to talk about the risks and seek help. If anyone sees drugs sold in their neighborhood, they're encouraged to contact city police. After a day to digest the news, local teachers' unions have more questions than answers about the Ford government's return to school plan. Union leaders feel some of their requests were not heard by Queen's Park, and they're warning about the potential of not only students, but also teachers not returning in the fall. Avery McCrae has details.
After a day to ponder the announcement Premier Ford gave Thursday on the province's plan to return to school in the fall, local teachers' union leaders say they want the return of classes, but they're not happy with the way it's being done. The OSSTF, ETFO, and OECTA's biggest concerns are on the ability to social distance students to keep them and staff safe. Vice President of the OSSTF, Paul Kakamo, says schools like Hammersholt High will have upwards of 30 kids per class, and it will be difficult to keep a meter of distance, something the unions made clear when expressing their concerns on returning.
For months and months, we have been asking them to sit down with us. We have been suggesting ideas to them how we can work cooperatively to make staff and students safe. And they have literally taken our information, taken our suggestions, and said thanks for that, and have never responded or engaged in a two-way conversation about what needs to be done collectively to make things work.
How do you keep 30 students in a class safe from a social distance perspective? Very difficult to do that.
We don't want to be the guinea pigs here. We want to be the champions of making sure that families and students and staff are all safe and not placed in a position where they're put at risk.
There's growing concerns from some families that the return to school plan may not be as safe as it should be. An undisclosed number of parents have already informed the schools their children will not be attending class in the fall to protect themselves and their families from the virus. And it's not only the parents who have those concerns.
We have certainly a number of members who suffer from immunocompromising medical conditions or live in homes where people in their homes are immunocompromised, and they're very concerned, and they are asking us what our options are.
Those considerations really need to be looked at from not only the ministry's perspective, the government's perspective, but the school board's perspectives as well.
With just over a month until students return, the unions will continue to question and work with the school boards to make the schools as safe as possible for the September return. Avery McCrae, TBT News.
Thunder Bay has 2 new COVID-19 cases. The health unit confirmed today that a man in his 60s and a woman in her 50s have each contracted the virus through travel. They're both self-isolating at home. That brings the number of active cases in the Thunder Bay District Health Unit catchment area up to 4. There have been 97 confirmed cases overall since the pandemic began. The Thunder Bay Community Foundation has asked the city to purchase tens of thousands of disposable masks to be distributed to those who can't afford to buy them. The Thunder Bay District Health Unit's mandatory mask order took effect last Friday, but Community Foundation officials say the order puts major financial pressure on those living in poverty. They've asked the city to buy 75,000 adult masks and 1,300 child-sized masks. Executive Director Alexandra Calderon says that will buy the Community Foundation and the United Way about 4 to 6 weeks to implement a more permanent solution.
The initiative to provide access to masks is two-pronged. The first being this request to City Council to consider making funds available for the purchase of disposable masks specifically for vulnerable populations. This will address the immediate needs of vulnerable community members, while the United Way of Thunder Bay and the Thunder Bay Community Foundation look to undertake a longer-term initiative to provide support for the acquisition of reusable masks to distribute to the same vulnerable populations.
City staff is now looking into the matter and report back to council at its next meeting on August 10th. Well, it's better late than never. Canada's new COVID-19 smartphone app is now up and running here in Ontario. The voluntary program is called COVID Alert, and it warns users if they've been around someone who's tested positive for the virus. Scott Lightfoot has more.
It's called COVID Alert, and as of today, it is a free download for any Canadian with a relatively up-to-date smartphone. The app uses Bluetooth technology to constantly exchange randomized codes with nearby phones. If someone with the app tests positive for COVID-19, they are given a code to upload. That code will then anonymously notify other users who spent more than 15 minutes within 2 meters of that person.
I've downloaded the app this morning, and I encourage you to do the same.
Please, everyone, please download the app and help do your part.
The Made in Ontario app is being promoted by both the federal and provincial governments. Those behind the app stress that no personalized information is collected and randomized codes are only stored for 14 days. They also say the app cannot connect your identity with the codes, nor does it have any way of knowing your location, name, contacts, or health information. Still, some people are apprehensive about the technology and its benefits.
Because I think Canada's done such a good job and built a lot of trust with people, I'll download it and use it. In a normal circumstance, I wouldn't.
I think some people will go for it because they're concerned about it, but then you have the other people that are more concerned about their privacy.
I think it's a great idea, but I personally wouldn't use it because I'd be worried about like security breach and what other information the app has access to.
Valid or not, worries about privacy may be one of the reasons why similar contact tracing apps haven't had wide-scale adoption in other countries.
In the ideal world, uptake for contact tracing apps would be 100%, but in reality, we are nowhere near there. Iceland almost tops the list at 38%, Italy barely a quarter, Singapore 20%, and France only 3% of citizens have stepped forward to download the apps.
Officials here hope Canadians will get on board by downloading the free app in the hopes of helping to control the spread of COVID-19.
You should look at your phone and remind yourself that you've got, Gmail, YouTube, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, what else? Everything on and on and on, which are overtly taking your information. Okay, this one is not, and it's helpful to you. And it's helpful to the community around you.
A $157,000 funding shortfall is playing a role in the delays to complete Habitat for Humanity's latest home build in Thunder Bay. Volunteer crews continue to chip away at the project on Lee Street as 2 families with a total of 9 children await the duplex's completion, which is nearly a year behind schedule. Corey Nordstrom has more.
Habitat for Humanity's Leith Street build is making progress, but a shortage of funds and volunteers has local officials worried about the build finally being completed in 2020. The groundbreaking for the home was in May of 2019 and was scheduled to be complete last October. Lana Vukelik is the local Habitat CEO who took on the role after this build began. She says the pandemic was the latest factor leading to the delay, but it's mostly a severe lack of funds.
Our budget to complete this home, which is both sides, of course, is about $157,000.
Currently, volunteer workers are on site just 2 days a week, Vukelic says as much as they need donations, additional skilled workers are critical to completion, and they have a strategy to raise some of the necessary money.
And the fundraiser that we started is an electronic online raffle. And so it has a progressive. So we encourage everybody to buy tickets online, and we have a weekly draw every Wednesday at 3:15. So it's
This is the first year Habitat undertook a duplex build for 2 families with 9 children in total. Vukelic has high hopes on a completion date.
My goal would be to get them in for Thanksgiving. Now, I'm not saying if it's Thunder Bay or Canadian Thanksgiving or U.S. Thanksgiving, but if I can get them in before the snow flies, that would really be the goal.
And if they can't raise the funds in time, it will be another disappointing delay.
So if we can't finish it, we're going to have to close it up and, try to raise funds until next spring. And in the meantime, the families have been waiting already for a year and a half.
Corey Nordstrom, TVT News.
Wasaya Airways have announced the appointment of its new president and CEO. The announcement follows the retirement of Tom Morris after a total of 16 years at the helm. New CEO James Ward brings 15 years of experience working with First Nation communities and is familiar with the company, having spent 10 years of his career with the airway. Most recently, Ward was the CEO of Happy Time Tours, HD Leasing, and Carrick Express, and is still a director on the board of Anishinaabe Development Fund. Ward admits it's a challenge jumping into the aviation industry during the pandemic, but is looking forward to guiding the company through this difficult time.
No specific goals, just trying to do the best I can, and obviously just take the airline where I think it needs to be, and work with the excellent team here. Wasaya does have a lot of good people in place already, and looking forward to sharpening some of everyone's skills and seeing what I can contribute to the company.
Construction crews are set to remove the first large section of Marina Park pedestrian overpass next Thursday. The metal structure will be lifted with a crane and then lowered to a nearby parking lot where it will undergo 8 weeks of reinforcement, repainting, and testing. The overpass, built in the mid-1990s, has been closed for much of the summer as crews with Tom Jones Construction have been preparing for its removal. City project engineer Mike Vogrig says the big lift will be done in 2 phases starting next week.
The walkway is going to get lifted in 2 sections. The plan right now is to have the first section of walkway lifted on August the 6th. And the second section of the walkway, so that's a section over the Whalebay tracks, they plan to lift that, I believe it's August 13th to 14th. Once we have it in place, we'll be putting in a parking lot and building an enclosure around it so we can kind of sandblast, recoat the steel, do some additional testing, strengthen the steel where we need to do that. So we expect we'll be about 8 weeks of that kind of work kind of going on. And then we'll be lifting it back in place likely sometime in September.
The price tag for the removal, repair, and reinstallation of the pedestrian overpass was $1.3 million. Fort William Historical Park has reopened to the public for the first time since it closed on March 16th. The fort started welcoming small groups of visitors yesterday with a phased reopening plan that follows government guidelines and established new health and safety measures. These include physical distancing, reduced visitor capacity, and hand sanitizing stations. The tour through the park has also changed, with the exhibits open but with less staff and fewer historical reenactments. The price for admission has also changed for the 2020 season, as it now costs just $5 per person for the guided tour. The fort will be open to the public from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. Wednesday through Sunday. And following yesterday's testimony, the Prime Minister continues to be in the hot seat regarding his involvement with the We Charity scandal. We'll have more on that after the break.
The idea that someone on their personal vacation would choose to support a good cause or get involved in helping make the world a better place is not something that we should reject or turn away from.